Welcome to the Tired Thinker, where ethics hum quietly under streetlights and the weight of choice settles like dusk. Tonight's story belongs to morality, to dilemmas so clean-cut they become impossible, so simple they twist the mind in on itself. We ask, if saving 5 lives means sacrificing one, what does it mean to choose? And more unsettling, what does it mean not to choose? Trolley problems are less about tracks and levers and more about the quiet machinery inside us, the part that calculates, hesitates, refuses to stand still. If an action protects many yet harms one, are we responsible for the harm we allow by staying still? Are we kinder when we stand back, or crueler? What becomes of morality when every choice is both mercy and violence? These aren't riddles with clean answers. They're mirrors, held up to where our values fray, where intention wrestles consequence, where we learn whether we act from heart, logic, or something older, quieter, unspoken. So tonight, we'll walk the narrow track where responsibility and compassion stare each other down. No fear, no judgment, only the soft wonder of minds willing to watch themselves choose. Before we begin, where in the world are you thinking from? What time of day holds your thoughts? And if these questions make something in you lean closer, feel welcome to follow along or subscribe, so more curious travelers might wander into dilemmas that never quite resolve. Now, let's begin. A lever sits there in the story of the trolley problem. A simple switch, a hand-sized device, the kind of thing anyone could move. Yet when we talk about it, we treat it like it weighs 1,000 pounds. We say the lever decides who lives and who dies. But the truth is simpler and harder. The lever does not decide anything. The person standing beside it does. The lever only reacts. The choice comes from the one who touches it. And once that choice is made, it becomes part of them. The trolley problem asks you to imagine a train car moving on a fixed track. On the current track, 5 people stand. They cannot move. You stand near the lever that can redirect the trolley onto another track. On the other track, 1 person stands. If you pull the lever, 1 person dies and 5 survive. If you do nothing, 5 die and 1 survives. There is no way to save everyone. You cannot remove yourself. You cannot shout. You cannot freeze time. You choose. The world will call it a moral test. But what makes it meaningful is not the situation. It is the person who must act. People often ask, what is the right answer? As if one exists. Some say the right choice is to pull the lever because saving more lives reflects rational compassion. Others say the right choice is to refuse because acting means taking direct responsibility for harm. Both sides believe they stand with reason. Yet the real weight does not come from logic or theory. It comes from identity. People reveal themselves when forced to pick harm over harm. The lever asks not what you believe in theory, but who you are when values clash. Think of 2 individuals at the same switch. One grew up valuing efficiency. They learned to think in terms of outcomes and totals. They see 5 lives on one track and 1 on the other. They pull the lever without delay. For them, preventing more death matters most. They live with the knowledge that they caused a death by action, but they accept it because they believe reducing suffering defines good. Now think of another person. They value the idea of moral innocence. They believe that doing harm is worse than allowing harm. They freeze at the idea of being the direct cause of a death. They leave the lever in its current position. 5 die, but their hand remains clean of intentional action. They can say, I did not kill anyone, the trolley did. They may suffer guilt, but they can locate themselves in a belief that their inaction kept them from committing violence. These two people live different internal lives. When asked who they are, each will give a different story, and the stories will make sense to them. The lever only revealed the structure that already existed inside them. The trolley problem seems theoretical, yet versions of the lever appear in ordinary life. A nurse allocates limited beds during a crisis. A parent decides which job to take when one allows time with family and the other offers financial safety. A teacher chooses which student gets attention in a crowded classroom. A driver brakes or swerves. In each case, the person weighs cost, harm, and identity. The choices shape who they are because they must live in the story of what they did. We often believe that who we are leads to the choices we make, but the reverse also happens. The choices we make shape who we believe we are. After someone pulls the lever, they may see themselves as someone who accepts hard truths. After someone refuses to pull it, they may see themselves as someone who does not cross a certain moral line. The choice becomes a mirror that reflects back a version of oneself that feels solid and consistent. In this way, the lever writes identity. Many people avoid thinking about these dilemmas because they do not like what the reflection might show. They fear they might be colder or softer than they imagined. They fear they may not act according to their stated values. They fear that either choice will expose something they cannot fully control. And that fear is reasonable. The lever asks a person to stand in the open, with no explanation to hide inside. But the lever also shows something else. It shows that morality does not exist only in rules. It exists in relationships. The person on the track is not a symbol. They are someone's sibling, partner, friend, or parent. Even in an abstract model, we imagine faces. That is why the trolley problem shifts when conditions change. If the one person is a close friend and the five are strangers, many who would pull the lever now refuse. If the five are criminals and the one is a doctor, the response shifts again. If the one is a child and the five are near the end of life, the decision changes once more. The lever forces us to notice how our values curve around the ones we care about. This matters because it reveals identity in motion. We think we hold fixed beliefs, but our beliefs move when the story changes. The lever knows not only your name, but your attachments, your griefs, your private loyalties. The problem is not abstract. It carries your history with it. In some cases, the lever becomes even heavier. Imagine that the one person volunteered to stand on the track to save the five. Now pulling the lever honors their choice. Or imagine the five forced the one onto the track. Now pulling the lever rewards injustice. The mechanism has not changed. The moral weight comes from the relationships and intentions wrapped around the bodies on the rails. People want to imagine they are the type who always knows what is right. But the lever shows that the sense of rightness comes after the choice, not before. We decide, then we explain. We act, then we narrate. The lever holds this quiet truth. You are not only the person who thinks, you are the person who chooses. The identity that emerges is the one you must live beside. The classic trolley problem begins with numbers. 5 on one track, 1 on another. The trolley moves fast, and someone stands beside a switch. If the switch is not touched, 5 will die. If the switch is pulled, 1 will die instead. It appears simple at first. 5 is greater than 1. Saving more lives seems like the obvious choice. Yet the moment a person imagines themselves at the switch, the problem stops being simple arithmetic. A number is not a person. 5 is not 5 faces. 1 is not an empty placeholder. Empathy and math meet in the same place, and they do not speak the same language. People often approach the problem as if it were only a matter of counting. If fewer die, the world holds less loss. That seems reasonable. But when someone imagines the act of pulling the lever, they realize the action ties them to the outcome. The harm becomes something they caused, not something that happened. They must live with the knowledge that they redirected the trolley. The person who pulls the lever becomes part of the story of the life that is lost. Numbers can tell what changed, but they do not tell what it feels like to be responsible. Imagine two people facing the same situation. One works in emergency medicine. They make quick decisions every day. They measure harm and benefit as part of their job. They likely pull the lever. They know resources are always limited. They know that sometimes the question is not whether harm will happen, but which harm is lesser. Their empathy has adapted to these conditions. It does not mean they care less. It means they have accepted a world where loss cannot always be prevented. Now imagine someone who has never faced an event where a choice led to irreversible harm. They may freeze. They may feel that taking direct action that kills someone makes them the cause of death. They may think that doing nothing leaves the responsibility outside themselves. They may believe that inaction keeps them morally clean, even though the result is greater death. Here, empathy focuses not on total lives saved, but on proximity to the act of harm. The one feels closer, more personal, more like something they could not bear. The arithmetic of empathy moves differently from the arithmetic of numbers. When people see a group, they may feel less connection than when they see one individual clearly. This is known in psychology as the identifiable victim effect. We sometimes feel more for one person we can imagine than for many people we cannot picture at all. If the 5 are strangers and the 1 is a close friend, many who claimed they would pull the lever now refuse. The math did not change. The empathy did. Empathy spreads unevenly. It gathers where stories are known. It softens where faces are clear. If someone knows the name of the one person on the other track, but the 5 remain faceless, their emotional weight shifts. It becomes harder to treat the trolley problem as a matter of numbers when identity enters the picture. We often think of fairness as a neutral thing, but fairness is not untouched by personal ties. Consider another variation. The 5 people on the main track are part of a work crew who ignored posted warnings. The one person on the second track followed every safety rule. In this scenario, some people feel that the 5 are responsible for their own danger, and the 1 is innocent. Now empathy mixes with ideas of justice. The lever now represents not only saving the most lives, but choosing who deserves harm and who deserves protection. The simple question of 5 versus 1 becomes tangled in beliefs about responsibility. People sometimes say that morality should rise above feelings. They argue that logic should guide these choices. But humans do not process harm through logic alone. When someone imagines pulling the lever, they picture the one person's fear. They picture the moment the trolley hits. They picture the life that ends because of them. Empathy creates vivid imagery. Numbers create totals. Both are real. Both guide choice. There are people who believe that the right choice is always to act so that fewer die. They may say that refusing to pull the lever is no different from causing the deaths of the 5 through inaction. They treat inaction as a choice like any other. This position has a clear shape. It says the moral weight comes from outcomes, not intentions. If harm must happen, they argue, we should choose the path that leaves fewer harmed. There are others who say the right choice is to avoid becoming the agent of harm. They believe that directly causing a death crosses a boundary that should not be crossed. They see a difference between allowing harm to continue and actively causing harm. Even if more die, they feel they did not participate in violence. For them, identity matters more than arithmetic. Both positions contain empathy. One empathizes with the many who can be saved. The other empathizes with the directness of killing one person. Neither choice feels easy when imagined fully. This is why the trolley problem continues to matter. It does not teach us which choice is correct. It shows us that empathy does not work like math. It does not distribute evenly. It does not scale smoothly. It does not remain neutral. When we see numbers, we imagine sums. When we see people, we imagine stories. The lever sits between those two ways of understanding life. The hand that moves it, or refuses to move it, reveals which understanding feels more real to the one who stands there. The trolley problem is often described as a moment of decision. But the moment that defines it is not the pull of the lever. It is the pause before the pull, the stillness, the breath held in the throat, the mind working faster than language can keep up. In that space, morality is not about math or rules. It's about what it feels like to stand in the presence of harm and know that something must happen and that you are the one who must act. The situation begins the same way it always does. A trolley speeds toward 5 people who cannot move from the track. You stand by a lever that can redirect the trolley to a side track where one person is trapped. Time does not stop, but thought stretches. You know you cannot save everyone. The choice sits in your hands, yet your body does not move right away. That is the moment that matters. Hesitation is not the absence of decision. It is part of decision. Pause allows the weight of the situation to settle. Many people who talk about the trolley problem treat hesitation like a flaw. They speak as if a moral person would know what to do instantly. Yet most people do not decide instantly. They hesitate because they understand that whatever they choose, a life will end. The pause honors the value of life by refusing to treat the situation as simple. Think of someone who has studied ethical theory. They may believe that the right action is the one that reduces total harm. They might say that pulling the lever is the logical and moral response. Yet when they imagine their hand closing over the switch, they feel something slow in them. The thought of becoming the cause of harm enters their awareness. They hesitate. The theory remains clear, but the feeling complicates it. Now think of someone who believes that doing harm directly is worse than allowing harm to continue. They may say that they would leave the lever untouched, yet when they picture the 5 on the track, their minds drift to their families, their friends, the lives they will lose. They imagine grief spreading across communities. They hesitate. The belief stays, but empathy brings new tension. The moment of stillness reveals that morality is not only about what we value. It is about how those values conflict with one another. The pause is where we recognize that harm done through action and harm allowed through inaction both live inside the choice. The pause is where we recognize that no matter what we do, we are not innocent. In daily life, hesitation plays a similar role. A driver sees a pedestrian step into the street and has only a split second to respond. The mind does not speak in sentences. It moves in instinct, memory, and habit. A parent hears a child cry and must decide whether to comfort or to teach independence. The hesitation reflects care, not uncertainty. A nurse must choose whom to attend to first during a busy shift. The pause does not slow them, it prepares them. Hesitation shows that a person is not a machine. Our minds do not process harm in straight lines. We consider who may suffer, who may live, and how we will live with ourselves afterward. Stillness before the pull is where we see morality not as a rule book, but as something lived in the body. There is a version of the trolley problem where the pause is extended. The person at the switch is given more time. They can think, reflect, weigh the situation. Even with more time, hesitation remains. The choice does not become easier because all that extra time reveals more dimensions of the situation. Where we once saw numbers, we begin to see relationships. Where we once saw strangers, we begin to imagine faces. Where we once saw harm, we begin to consider meaning. If the one person on the sidetrack is a child and the 5 are adults, hesitation stretches. If the 5 are strangers and the 1 is someone you love, hesitation deepens in a different way. If the 5 are people who forced the 1 onto the track, hesitation carries a sense of justice. Pause becomes the place where moral reasoning and emotional understanding meet. The stillness is also where identity appears. Some people discover that they cannot pull the lever, no matter the numbers. Others find they cannot leave the lever untouched, no matter the emotional cost. The pause reveals what a person fears becoming. Someone might hesitate because they fear they will become ruthless. Someone else might hesitate because they fear they will become passive. The pause is not empty, it is full. There is also a fear in hesitation that often goes unspoken. The fear of making the wrong choice. People imagine living with their decision. They imagine explaining it to others. They imagine defending it to themselves. The pause acknowledges that harm leaves marks, not only on those harmed, but on those who decide. The person at the lever must live with their choice long after the trolley stops moving. Even in everyday conflicts, hesitation works the same way. Before a difficult conversation, there is a pause. Before saying no to someone you care about, there is a pause. Before choosing to act against a wrong you witness, there is a pause. The pause is part of morality. It is the place where we face ourselves before we act. The stillness before the pull is not weakness, it is recognition. It is the mind acknowledging the real weight of being human among other humans. Harm is never abstract when we are the ones who must choose. The moment before the lever moves shows that morality is not only in the action, it lives in the hesitation that comes first. The trolley problem often focuses on the moment of choice, the lever, and the people we can see. But many consequences in this thought experiment never step into view. When we imagine the trolley moving down the track, we picture the ones who stand there now. We do not picture who they would become, who they care for, or who depends on them. These unseen effects are ghosts on the tracks. They are invisible, but present. Every decision we make touches lives we will never meet. In the classic scenario, 5 stand on one track and 1 stands on another. The trolley approaches. You stand at a lever. You choose who survives and who does not. The result looks simple. Some people live, some die. But the moment does not end there. The lives that continue and the lives that end extend outward in time. A person is never only themselves. They are part of others. We do not see those others in the scenario, but they are there. Imagine the 5 workers on the first track. Each one has relationships. One has a partner waiting for them to come home. One has a child who has not learned to ride a bike yet. One takes care of a parent who cannot live independently. We do not see any of those people in the thought experiment, but they are part of its real consequence. To save the 5 is not only to save 5 bodies, it is to preserve all the routines and attachments surrounding them. Now imagine the one person on the second track. They have relationships too. They may be the emotional center of a family. They may be the only person holding a small group together. They may be a teacher who shapes young minds, or someone recovering from hardship with a new chance to rebuild. If you choose to pull the lever and send the trolley toward them, the harm does not end at that moment. Their world collapses in ripples. Those ripples move through the lives of others. The trolley problem forces us to consider harm in a narrow frame, yet real harm is wide. When someone dies, their presence does not disappear cleanly. It leaves a space that others must learn to fill, or learn to live with unfilled. The trolley problem compresses these complexities so that we can see the ethical dilemma more clearly. But when we pull the lever in our imagination, part of what makes the decision difficult is that we sense those invisible ripples even without naming them. There are real-world choices that resemble this structure. A policy that reduces funding for one public service may save money that helps a wider group, but it may also close the one program that held together the lives of a specific set of people. A surgeon performing triage in a crowded hospital chooses who receives immediate care and who waits. The patients they do not treat right away may worsen. The surgeon may not know who they leave behind in grief, or who they save into future joy. They must act without knowing the full story. When we make decisions that affect others, we often do not see what happens next. A teacher spends time helping one student more than another. Years later, one student thrives and the other withdraws. The teacher may never know. A manager chooses one job candidate over another. One person builds a stable life. The other struggles or leaves the field. The manager may never learn how that choice shaped a future. We frequently make decisions where we do not witness the final outcome. The trolley moves on without us. In the thought experiment, the ghosts are not supernatural. They are simply unseen consequences. We call them ghosts because they are present and absent at the same time. They shape our feelings even when we cannot describe them. When someone hesitates at the lever, it is not always because they are unsure which side to save. It may be because they sense that no matter what they choose, their decision will reach farther than they can see. Some people try to solve the problem by appealing to rules. They may say that saving more lives is always better, or that avoiding direct harm is always morally superior. Rules reduce complexity. They calm the mind by offering certainty. Yet rules do not remove the ghosts. Even when a rule feels clear, the person making the decision may still feel the weight of unseen consequences. The ghosts are part of moral life. They appear whenever our actions affect others. In some versions of the trolley problem, the one on the sidetrack is someone who has already contributed greatly to others. Maybe they are a doctor who has saved many lives. Maybe they are a researcher working on a treatment that will help countless patients. Here, people sometimes shift their choice. They feel that one person may matter more than 5, not because one life inherently outweighs 5, but because the future influence of that one may reach farther. The ghosts become more visible. Another variation describes the 5 people as individuals near the end of life and the one as a young child. Many will choose to save the child. Others will feel it is unfair to decide based on projected futures. The ghosts argue with each other. They speak in imagined possibilities. We hear them even when we cannot verify them. The trolley problem shows that every moral choice extends beyond the immediate moment. It forces us to meet the truth that our actions create effects we cannot predict or fully understand. The unseen consequences travel with the trolley long after the moment of decision has passed. They exist whether we acknowledge them or not. The tracks do not end where we stop looking. In the trolley problem, The most discussed action is the pull of the lever, but there is another choice that receives less attention: doing nothing. Many imagine that leaving the lever untouched means staying uninvolved. They say the trolley was already moving, the harm was already set in motion, and they did not cause it. They treat inaction as neutral. Yet, doing nothing is not neutral. It is a decision that allows harm to continue. The result is the same as choosing actively, but the responsibility feels different. That difference is what makes omission difficult to see. The classic scenario places 5 people on one track and 1 on another. The trolley moves toward the 5. You stand at a switch that can redirect it toward the 1. If you pull the lever, 1 person dies. If you do nothing, 5 die. It is common for people to think that by avoiding the pull, they avoid causing death. But the death still happens. The decision rests in the stillness of your hand. The harm that follows is linked to your choice, even though your body did not move. People often feel less responsible for harm they allow than for harm they cause directly. This difference shows up in ordinary life. Imagine someone who sees a coworker being treated unfairly. They notice the behavior. They know they could speak up or offer support. Yet they say nothing. They tell themselves the conflict does not involve them. But silence influences outcomes. The injustice continues because no one interrupts it. Doing nothing shapes the world, even when it appears passive. Consider a teacher who sees 2 students struggling. One will likely fall behind without help. The teacher has many students and limited time. The teacher focuses on grading instead of intervention. The struggling student does fall behind. The teacher did not intend harm. They did not embarrass or neglect the student on purpose. Yet omission played a role. Inaction became part of the cause. There is a difference between intention and effect, but both matter. Many people fear causing direct harm because it feels like crossing a line. They fear being the reason someone suffers. They fear becoming the agent of pain. But allowing harm to happen can also cause suffering. When we talk about omission, we point to harm that occurs because someone could have changed the situation but chose not to. In the trolley problem, doing nothing feels like a way to avoid personal guilt. The trolley was already set on its path. The 5 were already in danger. The person at the lever can say, "I did not kill anyone, the trolley did." Yet this phrasing hides the role of the one who witnessed and chose not to intervene. The harm may feel distant, but the choice is present. Omission often carries a quiet kind of violence. It is not loud or obvious. No movement marks the moment it occurs. There is no sound of impact, no sudden gesture. The harm unfolds slowly, often out of sight. That makes omission harder to remember and harder to take responsibility for. When we act, we can point to what we did. When we do nothing, the reason for the outcome can feel unclear or diffused, even though it came from a choice. A person may hesitate at the lever because they fear the guilt of pulling it. They imagine the one person's face. They imagine the feeling of causing death. But if they choose not to pull the lever and 5 die, they may later face a different kind of guilt. They may realize they allowed preventable harm to unfold. Both forms of guilt are real. The difference is which guilt feels more tolerable. Many people believe that action carries more moral weight than inaction. This belief shows up in law. In many legal systems, failing to act is not punished unless a specific duty exists, such as the duty a doctor or lifeguard holds. But morality reaches wider than law. In relationships, in families, in communities, people notice when help could have been given and was withheld. The harm of omission is often felt personally, even if it is not punished publicly. There are situations where omission feels easier because harm from inaction is less visible. A person may see a stranger fall and look away. They may assume someone else will assist. They may leave without witnessing the result. the harm still happened. The person may tell themselves that they were not involved, but involvement is not defined by physical contact. It is defined by presence in the moment where choice existed. Imagine another version of the trolley problem. A person at the lever is aware the 5 on the track are asleep and unaware of danger. The one on the other track is also unaware. The bystander knows they have time to act. They know the outcome depends on them. The stillness of their hand decides everything. Here, omission cannot be separated from decision. Doing nothing does not remove responsibility. It simply hides it. People sometimes protect themselves from the emotional weight of omission by telling a story after the fact. They may say they did not know what to do. They may say they did not want to interfere. They may say they were afraid of making things worse. These explanations may be true, but they do not erase the role of inaction. Harm still followed from the choice not to act. In some cases, omission harms not only others, but the one who omits. When someone stays silent where they could have spoken, they may later feel that they failed themselves. They may feel they betrayed a value they believed they held. They may feel that the world moved on without them, and that they missed a moment to shape its direction. The violence of omission can be inward as well as outward. Doing nothing is not empty. It is not weightless. It is not neutral. The hand that stays still can cause as much change as the hand that moves. The trolley continues either way, but the choice belongs to the person standing there. The track does not choose itself. The lever in the trolley problem does not require strength. It does not demand force or endurance. A single finger can move it. A small motion shifts the path of a heavy machine. This contrast is the center of the dilemma. A tiny action can produce an irreversible outcome. The person at the lever does not need to lift anyone, push anyone, or physically harm anyone. They only need to move a finger, yet the effect of that motion changes who lives and who dies. The gap between effort and consequence is wide, and that space is where moral weight gathers. In the classic scenario, the trolley moves toward 5 people on the main track. They cannot move. On the side track stands one person, also unable to escape. You stand beside the lever. If you pull it, the trolley will switch tracks and kill 1. If you leave it, the trolley will continue and kill 5. The physical action is simple. The moral action is not. The finger hesitates, not because the lever is hard to move, but because what follows cannot be undone. Small actions that lead to large outcomes are not limited to this imagined situation. Many decisions in real life work the same way. A driver turns the steering wheel an inch too far. A nurse adjusts the dosage of medication slightly. A teacher chooses to send a message of encouragement or stays silent. The scale of the gesture does not match the scale of the consequence. A person may spend a second deciding, yet the effects may shape years. Someone might think the trolley problem is extreme, but the idea behind it is common. We make dozens of choices each day that affect others, even if we do not see the results. When someone speaks a harsh word in frustration, the person who hears it carries the tone into their day. When someone holds a door open, the receiver may feel seen. When someone decides not to answer a call, the caller may feel alone. The motion is small. The emotional shift can be large. Consider a scenario where a manager has to choose which of 2 employees gets a promotion. The manager may sign 1 document, send 1 email, or say 1 sentence. The gesture takes almost no time. One employee's workload and income will change. Their confidence may rise. Their family may feel more secure. The other employee may question their value. They may seek another job. they may carry quiet disappointment. The manager's finger moves, a world changes. Or consider a doctor working in an emergency room. They decide which patient to see first. A hand lifts a chart. A word is spoken. One patient receives treatment sooner than another. Sometimes minutes matter. The doctor cannot know every ripple of the choice, but the consequences unfold regardless. They may change a life, or they may end one. The doctor's action is deliberate, yet physically light. The result is not. People sometimes imagine that responsibility matches effort. They assume heavy actions create heavy accountability, and light actions create light accountability. The trolley problem shows this is not true. The lever is light. The moral burden is not. The finger that moves it carries the weight of outcomes far larger than itself. The problem also challenges the intuition that intentions alone determine morality. A person may intend to save lives, but the result of their action is still a death. A person may intend not to cause harm, but the result of their inaction is also a death. The finger moves, or the finger stays still. The difference between motion and stillness feels small, but the consequences are not. This scale inconsistency creates a type of discomfort. The body expects physical weight where emotional weight exists. The mind expects effort where responsibility sits. When these do not align, the moment feels unreal. Someone may say it was only a small thing, even when the impact is large. They may struggle to accept the role they played because the action felt too small to matter. But small actions matter. The lever reminds us of this. A subtle kind of loneliness can appear in the person who pulls the lever. They may feel that others cannot understand how a small motion could leave such a large impression on them. They may replay the moment many times, not because they doubt what they did, but because the size of the outcome does not match the size of the gesture. The mind tries to bridge the gap. In relationships, this pattern repeats. One person says something they think is minor. The other remembers it for years. A parent sets a boundary once, and a child learns something permanent. A friend cancels one meeting, and the friendship begins to fade. The motions are small. The meaning grows with time. When we talk about responsibility, we often forget the influence of small acts. We focus on big decisions, major commitments, visible events. Yet the everyday motions, pauses, glances, words, small choices, do most of the shaping. The lever in the trolley problem is dramatic only because the consequences reveal themselves immediately. In real life, the effects unfold slowly. They can be harder to see, but no less real. The weight of a single finger is not in the motion itself. It is in what follows. The trolley problem brings this into focus by compressing time and making outcomes clear. The world does not always make consequences visible, but they are present. A small choice can change the path of many lives. The finger moves. The world shifts, even when no one else notices. In the trolley problem, the people on the tracks are often described in simple terms: 5 on one side, 1 on the other. They have no names, no histories, no families, and no future in the setup. They are distant, abstract, and faceless. Because of this, many people answer the problem quickly. They treat it like math. 5 lives outweigh 1. But if we change nothing about the situation except one detail, who these people are to the person at the lever, the answer often changes. The idea of who counts as real shifts the moral weight of the decision. Humans respond to what feels close. We care more about what we can picture. When a person is a stranger described only as a number, they become harder to feel for. The mind holds them in a kind of soft outline. They exist, but they do not feel fully real. This is not cruelty. It is a limitation of how empathy works. Empathy grows stronger with detail. It becomes sharper when we know a face, a voice, or a story. Imagine the classic trolley scenario again. 5 people on the main track, 1 on the side track. You stand at the lever. You know that pulling the lever saves 5 and kills 1. Many people say they would pull the lever. Now introduce a simple change. The 1 person on the side track is your friend, or your sibling, or your partner. Suddenly the math feels different. The 5 on the main track have not changed, but your emotional landscape has. When someone you love stands on the track, they become more real to you than 5 strangers ever could. Not because the strangers matter less as human beings, but because you cannot imagine their lives in the same way. You know the laugh of the 1 person. You know their habits. You know the way they react when they are tired. You cannot see the strangers as clearly. The mind fills in the missing details with blank space. This is not only true in imaginary problems, it shows up in how we respond to suffering in the world. People may cry over the story of 1 child in danger, while remaining untouched by statistics describing thousands. The 1 child is a story. The thousands are a number. When suffering is distant, it becomes abstract. The mind protects itself from being overwhelmed by letting the distant become less real. There is a name for this difference in response. It is sometimes called the identifiable victim effect. A single person with a name and a face can evoke more care than a whole group described only by quantity. The effect does not mean we lack compassion. It means compassion follows attention. What we can picture becomes vivid. What we cannot picture becomes faint. Think of a news headline that reports a disaster and lists the number of lives lost. The number may be large. The reader may pause, then move on. Now imagine a story about 1 individual affected by the disaster, someone with hopes, disappointments, and a past. People tend to remember that story. They feel for that person. The 5 on the track remain in the mind as silhouettes, but the 1 with a story becomes vivid. Distance shapes empathy. Abstraction creates a quiet numbness. When we do not see people, they become easier to ignore. When we do not hear their voices or understand their struggles, their suffering becomes a concept. This does not mean we are uncaring. It means empathy does not operate by rational scale. It operates by emotional closeness. In the trolley problem, people sometimes say they would save the 5 because saving more lives seems like the correct choice, but they may feel uneasy about the decision. They may imagine the 1 person more clearly than the 5. If the 1 person is imagined as young, kind, or full of promise, that image may overpower the anonymous group. The feelings and the logic move in different directions. Now consider a workplace situation. A manager must choose how to distribute limited resources. If they know 1 staff member well and barely know the others, they may unconsciously prioritize the 1 they know. They may think of it as fairness. In truth, it is closeness. The more real someone feels, the more we protect them. The illusion of indifference often appears when harm is distant. A person may scroll past a story about suffering happening far away because they do not feel it. They may believe they are indifferent. But if they sat across from someone experiencing that suffering, if they heard their voice tremble, if they saw their exhaustion, they would feel different. Distance creates the illusion that we do not care. Proximity reveals we do. This insight applies to silence as well. A person may hear about inequity in a system they live within. They may acknowledge it, but not act because the people affected feel distant. They may think, it's not my issue. But if someone they loved were affected, the issue would become personal. The difference is not the situation, but the degree of emotional reality. The trolley problem becomes more complicated when we understand that what we call rational choice often depends on who feels real to us. We say that every life has equal value. but our decisions show that we do not always treat them as equal. Our empathy has edges and limits shaped by distance, familiarity, and personal history. The question who counts as real is not about who deserves to live. It is about who the mind can fully imagine. The fuller the imagination, the stronger the empathy. The fainter the image, the easier it is to treat someone as a number instead of a person. In real life, we often make choices without knowing the people those choices affect. Policies, routines, and habits reach farther than we realize. The people affected may never know who made the decision. The decision maker may never know who lived with the consequences. Distance hides the connection, but the connection remains. In the trolley problem, we talk about the person standing at the lever, but there is another figure who appears in a different way. The bystander who does not step forward. The one who sees the situation, understands what is happening, and chooses not to act. This person is not part of the machinery. They do not pull the lever. They do not stop the trolley. They remain still. The idea of the bystander can feel comfortable because it seems like a removed position, but it is not neutral. Watching harm while pretending not to see it shapes who we are, even if we tell ourselves we stayed outside the event. The classic argument is that if you do nothing, you are not responsible. The trolley was already moving. The 5 on the track were already in danger. The bystander did not cause any of this. They only observed. But observation does not erase influence. When someone sees harm and chooses not to intervene, their presence still matters. Inaction is a choice. The outcome still unfolds with them in the picture, even if they remain silent. People often want to avoid being the one who acts because action feels like taking ownership. Pulling the lever means making a decision that leads to someone's death. That kind of responsibility is heavy, but refusing to act leads to outcomes as well. 5 people die. The bystander did not push the trolley, yet the trolley continued. When we pretend not to see, we think we are avoiding responsibility, but we are shaping the result through omission. There are everyday versions of this. Imagine a group of students in a classroom. One student is teased repeatedly. The others see it. They know it is happening, but they look away. They do not want to be involved. Maybe they hope the problem will stop on its own. The bullying continues because no one interrupts it. The bystanders become part of the environment that allows harm to spread. Each person may think, "I didn't do anything." That is the point. Doing nothing can support the harm. In a workplace, a colleague may be overwhelmed with tasks. Others notice the strain. They know extra help would make a difference, yet no one steps forward. Everyone believes someone else will act. The colleague struggles, becomes exhausted, and begins to break down. The team did not intend to cause harm. They simply did not intervene. The bystander's shadow stretches across the outcome. People often imagine that morality is found in grand gestures, dramatic actions, or heroic sacrifices. But much of morality appears in small decisions. It appears in whether we acknowledge what we see. It appears in whether we speak or stay silent. Pretending not to see is a way to avoid discomfort, yet it changes something inside us. When we look away from suffering, we do not only protect ourselves, we train ourselves. The next time we see something similar, it becomes easier not to act. The bystander position becomes familiar. A pattern forms. At first, it is one moment of silence. Then it becomes a way of moving through the world. The self develops from repeated choices. Each time a person pretends not to see harm, they reinforce the idea that harm is not their concern. They build distance between themselves and others. They maintain a sense of innocence by separating themselves from responsibility. But this separation comes at a cost. It reduces empathy. It weakens the impulse to help. Over time, it becomes difficult to recognize themselves outside of this pattern. There is a particular discomfort that comes from witnessing harm and not acting. It sits quietly. A person may not speak about it, but they feel it. They replay the moment later. They think, "I should have said something." The thought arrives without being invited. This discomfort is the mind's way of reminding us that pretending not to see does not remove involvement. The event remains tied to us. In the trolley scenario, imagine a second person next to the one at the lever. The second person watches. They see the lever. They see the trolley. They see the people on the tracks. The first person hesitates. The second person remains silent. When the trolley continues, the first person may feel responsible. The second may feel relieved. Yet the second person was close enough to act. Their silence mattered. The bystander is not outside the situation. They are part of it. There are situations where stepping in feels dangerous. Someone witnessing a violent argument may fear making things worse. Someone who sees wrongdoing in an organization may fear consequences if they speak. These fears are real. The choice to intervene is not always simple, but pretending not to see is not the same as being unable to act. There is a difference between being powerless and choosing silence. Sometimes, a bystander avoids seeing harm because they worry that acknowledging it will require change. If they recognize suffering, they may need to rearrange their life, their beliefs, or their habits. Looking away protects a sense of comfort, but comfort gained from ignoring harm is fragile. It depends on maintaining distance. It depends on not looking directly at what is happening. The shadow of the bystander stretches not only over others, but also over the bystander themselves. When someone avoids acknowledging harm, they become someone who can look away. They internalize that version of themselves. Over time, the identity settles. The trolley problem presents the bystander as a silent figure. But in real life, silence is never empty. It is filled with the choice to remain still while harm moves forward. The self that emerges is shaped by that stillness. The shadow does not appear all at once. It develops each time we pretend not to see. In the trolley problem, the person at the lever did not ask for the role. They did not choose to be the one who must decide. They were placed there by circumstance. The trolley is already moving. The people on the tracks are already trapped. The moment arrives before preparation. Yet the person at the lever becomes responsible for the outcome because they are the one positioned to act. They did not seek power, but they have it. The situation gives it to them. The question becomes what to do when responsibility appears not as a choice, but as an unavoidable fact. Many real situations feel this way. Power does not always look like authority, titles, or formal leadership. Sometimes power is simply proximity to a decision. If you are the one standing nearest to the lever, you hold the ability to change what happens. That makes you responsible, even if you did not want to be. In the trolley scenario, the person at the lever may wish to step away. They may think someone more qualified should act. They may feel unprepared, but the trolley will not wait for readiness. The world does not pause so that a person can become the version of themselves that they would rather be before making a decision. The moment arrives and action follows. This is what responsibility feels like when it is not chosen, but assigned by circumstance. Think of a person who witnesses an accident on the road. They are not a doctor, firefighter, or trained responder. They did not cause the accident, yet they are the first one there. They have the power to call for help, to offer comfort, to prevent further harm. If they walk away, the harm grows. If they stay, they step into a role they did not seek. Power finds them because they are present. Another example appears in families. An eldest sibling may find themselves acting as support for younger siblings because circumstances require it. They did not choose to be responsible in that way, but age, timing, and capacity place them in a position where others rely on them. If they refuse the role completely, the family may struggle. If they accept it, they carry a weight that was not requested. Responsibility is often shaped by position rather than intention. When someone has the ability to influence an outcome, that ability becomes part of the moral calculation. The person at the lever holds the capacity to reduce harm or redirect it. The weight comes from knowing that any action will shape what happens next. In workplaces, similar patterns appear. A person may become the informal leader in a team, not because they asked for authority, but because others look to them for guidance. Their tone in a meeting influences outcomes. Their willingness to speak or to remain silent shapes what decisions are made. The power is not ceremonial, it is relational. It is built through how others respond to them. When someone becomes the engineer of outcomes, they must recognize the reach of their actions. It is easy to underestimate influence when the action seems small. A manager says a few words. A parent makes a routine choice. A voter marks a ballot. The gesture is brief, but the effects unfold across time. Like the lever in the trolley problem, the mechanism is light, but the result affects many lives. Some people avoid acknowledging their influence because responsibility feels heavy. If they convince themselves that their actions do not matter, they feel free of burden. But ignoring responsibility does not erase it. The outcome still follows from what they do or do not do. The engineer of outcomes cannot step outside the event by pretending they have no impact. There is a common belief that responsibility should belong only to those who chose it. But life does not organize itself around fairness. A person may find themselves with power because they are the only one available, the closest one, the one who noticed, the one who has the skill, or the one who was left standing when others withdrew. Power does not wait for permission. It settles where ability and situation intersect. When someone realizes they have power, their identity shifts. They see themselves in relation to others. They understand that what they do influences what happens next. This awareness can create a sense of burden, but it can also create clarity. The engineer of outcomes does not need to control everything. They only need to recognize when a decision rests in their hands. In the trolley problem, the person at the lever may hesitate, not because they are unsure of values, but because they feel the weight of directing consequences. They understand that choosing one life over several, or several over one, requires them to live with a story about themselves. The lever does not only decide who survives, it decides who the decision-maker becomes in their own memory. Responsibility involves both the outcome and the narrative that follows. A person may act to reduce harm and still feel the cost of the harm that remains. They may choose inaction and later feel responsible for the loss they allowed. The engineer of outcomes learns that responsibility cannot be escaped by stepping aside. It follows from presence. In daily life, people often hold power without realizing it. A teacher influences how a student sees themselves. A friend influences how another handles difficulty. A doctor influences how a patient understands their future. These roles do not always announce themselves. They appear in ordinary moments. Responsibility, when power finds you, is not about control. It is about acknowledging that your position in a moment shapes what follows. The person at the lever did not ask to be there, but they are. And because they are, the outcome carries their touch. In the trolley problem, the focus is often on the outcome. People argue about which choice is morally right, which principle should guide the decision, or how to measure harm. but less attention is given to the person who must decide, the one who stands at the lever, the one who must act or not act. That person carries the emotional cost of the choice long after the trolley stops. The decision ends in a moment. The feeling lasts much longer. This is the part of the problem that is often left out when we discuss it as an abstract puzzle. The emotional weight of being the decider is not abstract at all. Imagine the familiar scenario: 5 on the main track, 1 on the side track, and the trolley moving too fast to stop. You stand at the lever. You know the numbers. You know the logic. You know what each choice leads to. Yet knowing does not make choosing easy. The brain may say one thing. The heart says another. The hand hesitates. The moment feels heavy because the person who chooses becomes part of the story of what happens. If you pull the lever, you save 5, but kill 1. You may tell yourself that saving more lives is the most compassionate choice. You may believe that preventing more harm is the responsible thing to do, but after you pull the lever, you still know that 1 person died because of your action. The world may say you made the right decision. Rational frameworks may support it, but the emotional cost remains. You live with the knowledge that you caused a death. If you do not pull the lever, 5 people die. You might believe you were not responsible because the trolley was already on that path. You did not intervene. You did not directly cause harm, but later, when you remember the moment, you may feel the weight of letting harm unfold when you could have prevented it. You may think of the families of the 5. You may think of what could have changed. The emotional cost takes a different shape, but it is still heavy. There is no version of this where the decider walks away untouched. In real life, we face choices like this in quieter forms. A manager decides who gets laid off during a budget cut. One choice saves resources for the company, but harms specific people. Another choice protects certain individuals, but may hurt the group. No decision avoids loss. The manager must live with the result. Even when they choose carefully, they may replay it in their mind. A parent decides how to discipline a child who has acted out. The parent wants to teach responsibility while still protecting the child's sense of safety. They may choose one approach and later worry that they were too harsh. Or they may choose another and worry they were too lenient. Both paths have emotional cost because the parent cares. Caring creates weight. A doctor decides when to stop treatment that is no longer effective. The decision may spare a patient from prolonged suffering. It may also bring grief sooner. The doctor may understand the medical reasoning clearly, yet emotional clarity rarely follows. The sorrow does not come from confusion. It comes from empathy and connection. We sometimes imagine that certainty would remove the pain. If we knew for sure what the right choice was, we think the emotional burden would fade. But knowing the logic does not erase the loss. The emotional cost exists because something valuable disappears. It exists because harm is real, not theoretical. People who study ethics sometimes separate outcomes from feelings in order to analyze decisions more clearly. This can be useful in theory, but in real life, the emotional response is not just a side effect. It is part of the moral experience. The decider does not only choose what happens, they choose what they will carry. The sorrow of decision comes not only from the harm done, but from the recognition that there was no perfect choice. The person at the lever cannot remain innocent. No matter what they choose, they cross a threshold. They stop being a witness and become an agent. This shift has lasting effects on identity. Someone who pulls the lever may see themselves as someone who accepts hard truths. Someone who refuses may see themselves as someone who does not take life into their own hands. These identities form slowly and remain long after the event is over. The trolley problem is not really about what is right. It is about who we become when we must choose. Some people try to escape this responsibility by pretending there is no decision to make. They freeze, they wait, they hope something else intervenes. But the trolley continues. The refusal to choose is also a choice. The emotional cost arrives either way. The sorrow of being the decider is not weakness. It is evidence that the lives involved mattered. If the decision felt easy, something would be missing. Compassion makes the choice heavy. Responsibility makes it personal. The lever may be small. The motion of the hand may be slight. But the heart feels the weight of every life the decision touches. Even when the choice is done, the memory remains. The sorrow is not a sign of failure. It is the natural shadow cast by care. In the trolley problem, the decision happens in seconds. The lever moves or it does not. The trolley follows one track or the other. The bodies on the tracks live or die. The external event ends quickly, but inside the person who made the decision, something continues. A mark remains. It is not visible from outside. It does not announce itself. It forms slowly, like a stain. This is the idea of moral residue, the lasting impression a difficult choice leaves behind. Even when someone believes they chose well, the tracks in the scenario look simple. One main track, one side track. Yet after the decision, those tracks become memory. They hold the story of what happened. The person at the lever must live with what they did or did not do. The rails remember because the mind remembers. The scene becomes a part of the person's ongoing narrative of who they are. Imagine that the person pulled the lever. They saved 5 and sacrificed 1. Others may say they made the rational choice. They may say it was the right action, the responsible action, the necessary action. But later, in a quiet moment, the person may recall the face of the one. They may imagine the life that would have continued if they had done nothing. They may imagine the family of that person and how the news was received. Even if they believe firmly that pulling the lever was correct, the residue remains. It is not guilt in the sense of wrongdoing. It is the weight that comes from having shaped the world in a way that harmed someone. If the person did not pull the lever, the residue takes a different shape. They allowed 5 to die. They may tell themselves the harm was already in motion. They may say that they did not cause the deaths, the trolley did. But memory does not always follow logic. They may remember the opportunity to intervene. They may remember their hand not moving. They may wonder about the lives lost. The residue here is not about having taken direct action. It is about seeing harm and not preventing it. In real life, residue accumulates from decisions that involve loss, conflict, or irreversible outcomes. A doctor decides to withdraw treatment for a patient whose quality of life has deteriorated beyond recovery. They know the decision is medically sound. The patient feels peace. The family agrees, yet the doctor remembers. The memory is not regret. It is a trace of having accompanied someone to the edge of life. A teacher decides which student needs attention most urgently. They focus their time on the one who is falling fastest. Weeks later, they realize another student has begun to withdraw. The teacher did not choose wrongly. They had limited time, yet they feel something linger. A question that echoes, could I have done more? A friend chooses not to reach out to someone going through hardship because they believe the person needs space. Later, the friend learns that the person felt alone. The decision was not careless. It was made with care, but the residue appears anyway. Residue forms because we care about the effects of our choices. If you did not care, there would be no mark. The presence of residue means the situation mattered. It means the relationships or values involved were real. The trolley problem compresses moral residue into a clear image. The tracks are the past. The lever is the moment of decision. Afterward, the person stands with the memory. They cannot change the outcome. They can only narrate it. The stories we tell afterward are part of how we live with residue. Someone who pulled the lever may say, "I saved more lives." They may lean on utilitarian reasoning. It was the most good for the most people. This story is not false. It is a way to place the memory in a frame that feels bearable. Someone who left the lever untouched may say, "I did not want to be the cause of death." They may emphasize the difference between acting and allowing. This story, too, is a frame. It protects the self from being swallowed by the weight of possibility. These stories are not lies. They are interpretations. They help a person continue living with themselves, but the residue remains underneath. Sometimes it shows up as a quiet heaviness, sometimes as reflection, sometimes as a moment of pause in an unrelated situation where the mind returns to the memory without warning. Residue is not failure. It is the emotional imprint of having been responsible. There are decisions where no residue appears. Those decisions tend to be easy ones, clear choices. Choices where one outcome is clearly good and the other is clearly harmful. In those situations, there is no conflict. There is clarity. Residue appears when values conflict, when compassion pulls in two directions, when harm is unavoidable. We often imagine that the best decision is one that leaves us feeling certain. But certainty does not erase residue. Certainty only explains it. The person at the lever may later say, "I made the best choice I could." And that may be true. The residue remains because the best choice still contained loss. The rails in the trolley problem do not literally record anything, but the mind does. The memory of standing in that moment becomes part of how the person understands themselves. Residue shapes identity. A person may become more careful. They may become more empathetic. They may become more alert to the weight of decisions. Or they may become numb, using distance to avoid feeling. The residue moves differently in different people, but it always moves. We tell stories to make sense of what we carry. The story is how we continue forward while the rails remain behind us, holding the trace of where we have been and what we have chosen. In the trolley problem, the option to refuse is often mentioned but not explored. The person at the lever can step back. They can say, "I will not choose." They can let the trolley continue on its original path. 5 will die, 1 will live. The person who refuses may believe that by not acting, they avoid responsibility. They may think that the trolley was already in motion, that the harm did not come from their hand. Refusal seems clean. It seems like a way to protect one's sense of innocence. But refusing to decide is still a decision. The world continues along a path shaped, in part, by that refusal. In the classic version of the scenario, the trolley is headed toward 5 workers on the track. On the side track is 1 person. You stand near the lever. You have the ability to redirect the trolley. If you act, 1 dies. If you do nothing, 5 die. The choice is painful either way. The option to look away is tempting because it avoids the feeling of being the direct cause of harm. But doing nothing does not erase harm. It allows harm to unfold. The refusal is active, even when the body remains still. Many people who refuse feel that they are respecting a boundary. They believe they should not interfere. They may see the situation as one they did not create, and therefore are not responsible for resolving. They may think they are preserving a moral principle. I will not take a life. This principle is understandable. It's anchored in a belief that action that causes harm is worse than inaction that allows harm. But the moment we examine this more closely, we see a tension. Refusing to cause harm means letting harm happen. Both paths contain death. The question becomes not whether harm occurs, but which harm the person is willing to be connected to. Consider a real-world example. A manager witnesses bullying between coworkers. They tell themselves that getting involved could make the situation worse. They say, "It is not my place." They look away. The bullying continues. The harm grows. The manager may tell themselves they were neutral, but neutrality did not exist. Their refusal supported the environment where harm continued. Or think of someone who sees a person crying in a public place. They want to help, but fear intruding. They walk past. Later, they may never know whether their presence could have eased something. Refusing to engage feels safe, but the refusal also shapes the moment. The pain continues without interruption. Refusal often comes from fear. Fear of doing the wrong thing. Fear of making things worse. Fear of responsibility. Responsibility is heavy. To act means to accept the consequences of your decision. To refuse means to accept the consequences of inaction. Some believe the consequences of inaction are easier to live with. But this is not always true. The memory of "I could have done something" lingers. There are situations where refusal has been taught as the safest moral ground. For example, some people are raised with the rule that they must never harm another person, even if doing nothing results in greater harm to others. They hold the boundaries strongly. They see moral cleanliness as central to identity. In their view, taking a life, even to save lives, is a step they will not cross. But we must ask what that refusal protects. Does it protect the person on the track, or does it protect the one at the lever from seeing themselves as someone who can cause harm? Refusal can be an ethical stand. It can also be self-protection disguised as principle. Refusal has a shadow. Over time, repeated refusal to act can change how a person sees themselves. They may become someone who avoids situations of conflict, someone who waits for others to decide, someone who steps back when they are needed. This identity develops quietly. No single moment defines it, but the habit becomes familiar. Yet refusal is not always wrong. There are situations where stepping in causes harm that cannot be predicted or controlled. There are situations where someone truly lacks knowledge, ability, or stability to influence the outcome responsibly. In such cases, acting could produce more damage. Ethical refusal sometimes means recognizing one's limits. The complexity lies in distinguishing between responsible refusal and avoidance. Responsible refusal acknowledges the situation. It is thoughtful. It involves reflection on capacity and consequence. Avoidance is different. Avoidance pretends the situation does not exist. It turns away not from the situation, but from the discomfort it brings. Imagine another version of the trolley scenario. The person at the lever is overwhelmed. They panic. They freeze. They cannot think. Their refusal is not philosophical. It is emotional. When the trolley continues and the 5 die, the person may feel guilty, even though they were not trying to avoid responsibility. They simply could not respond. This form of refusal is tied to human limits. Not everyone can act under pressure. Not everyone has the same capacity for split-second moral decisions. This does not erase the outcome, but it does change how we understand the person who refused. The ethics of refusal is not about judging the person at the lever. It is about understanding the role that refusal plays in shaping outcomes and identity. Whether we act or do not act, we influence what happens next. Looking away is not emptiness. It is a choice with consequences. The trolley problem reveals that refusing to decide does not return us to innocence. It only changes the form of our involvement. The one who looks away remains part of the story. The rails carry their mark, even without the touch of a hand. The moment does not vanish. It becomes memory. It becomes identity. It becomes the quiet place where responsibility sits, whether spoken or not. In most discussions of the trolley problem, the moment of choice appears fixed. The trolley is moving. The people are on the tracks. You stand by the lever. You must decide. The problem is framed as if everything before the moment is already settled. But there is another way to look at it. Before deciding who lives and who dies, someone can ask why the situation exists at all. Why are these people on the tracks? Why is the trolley out of control? Why is no one else responding? The premise of the problem feels stable only because we accept it without questioning. But when we question it, the moral landscape shifts. The trolley problem compresses a moral dilemma into a single moment. It removes context so we can examine choice. In doing so, it strips away the causes and conditions that made the moment necessary. This simplification helps create clarity, but clarity is not the same as truth. Real decisions do not happen in sealed containers. They come from histories, environments, relationships, and structures. Imagine the scenario again. 5 workers are tied to a track. 1 worker is tied to another. The trolley speeds toward the 5. You stand by the lever. The framework says, choose. But if we pause and ask why this situation exists, we find layers that matter to our moral thinking. Who tied them there? Why is the trolley uncontrolled? Why are you the only person present? The moment did not appear in isolation. Something led to it. When we step into real life, context is never absent. A doctor who must decide which patient to treat first does not encounter the situation without background. They know the hospital is understaffed. They know resources are limited. They know some of these conditions are preventable. The moral decision does not begin at the point of action. It begins in the systems that shaped the situation. The trolley problem forces us to choose inside a narrow moment. But sometimes the more meaningful question is how to prevent such moments from arising. The trolley that asks why encourages us to look behind the scene instead of only at the scene. Consider someone who works in public policy. They do not face a single trolley decision, but they influence systems that determine how many trolley-like moments will arise in the future. They may work to improve safety regulations, funding, or social support. Their actions do not feel dramatic. They do not pull levers, yet they shape whether emergencies occur at all. This form of moral action is less visible, but it may prevent countless crises. If we look at the trolley problem as a metaphor, the fight on the track can represent large groups harmed by conditions they cannot control. The one on the side track can represent a group or individual who may be harmed by interventions meant to protect the many. Decisions about public health, environmental policy, education funding, and labor conditions often mirror this structure. But real-world scenarios are not sudden. They unfold slowly. And in those slow unfoldings, we have opportunities to ask why, long before a crisis forces a narrow choice. Asking why complicates the simplicity of the dilemma. It brings responsibility into areas the original problem leaves untouched. If the trolley is broken due to negligence, then responsibility does not rest only with the person at the lever. It rests with those who allowed the system to fail. If the workers are trapped because no one invested in safe working conditions, responsibility spreads outward. The ethics of prevention enters the conversation. The reason the classic trolley problem rarely includes this broader view is that it aims to isolate moral judgment about direct action versus inaction. Yet focusing only on the moment risks misleading us into thinking that morality mostly happens in moments of crisis. In truth, morality mostly happens before the crisis. It happens in how we build systems, relationships, habits, and expectations. In daily life, the trolley appears in subtle forms. A teacher must decide which student receives attention today. But the system that underfunded the school created the trolley. A social worker must choose which family to visit first. But the policy that stretched caseloads without support created the trolley. A neighbor hears someone in distress, but feels unsure whether intervening is appropriate. But the cultural norms that discourage involvement created the trolley. The lever moment is the visible part. The conditions that made the lever necessary are the unseen part. When someone asks why, they recognize that moral responsibility does not begin at the moment of choice. It begins in the forces that shape the choice. Asking why does not solve the dilemma in the moment. The trolley still moves. The tracks still diverge. The decision still stands. But asking why influences what we do after the moment. It changes how we think about preventing the next one. Sometimes the person at the lever cannot change the system in that moment. The choice remains immediate, but they can carry forward the awareness that prevention matters. When they tell others about the event, when they reflect on what happened, when they consider how to reduce similar harm in the future, they become part of the longer story. The trolley problem presents morality as one decisive moment, but life contains many small decisions long before the crisis emerges. The trolley that asks why reminds us that ethical work is not just choosing between two harms. It is understanding how we came to face them. It is seeing the tracks not only as paths of consequence, but as paths of history. And once we see that, we cannot unsee it. In the trolley problem, many people try to find the answer that lets them feel morally clean. They want to make a decision that saves lives and leaves them with a clear conscience. They want to be able to say, "I did the right thing," and believe it fully. But the structure of the problem makes that impossible. No matter what choice is made, someone is harmed. The person at the lever cannot escape that. Doing good in this situation does not remove the emotional or moral cost. The stain remains because a life was lost, and we carry the memory of the moment when we allowed or caused that loss. The classic scenario is familiar. The trolley moves toward 5 people who cannot escape. On a side track stands one person. You stand at the lever. If you pull it, the trolley switches tracks and kills one. If you do nothing, 5 die. The calculation seems simple. Save more lives. Many people state the answer quickly. They say pulling the lever is the moral choice. But when imagining themselves actually pulling the lever, they feel something shift. A small physical action becomes the cause of a death. The logic remains sound. The feeling does not align with it. This gap between logic and emotion is where the stain appears. It is not guilt in the sense of wrongdoing. It is the mark of having been involved in harm. Even if the involvement reduced greater harm, a clean conscience in the sense of being untouched is not possible. Imagine someone who chooses to pull the lever. They save 5 lives. They do what many ethical frameworks would call the most compassionate or rational choice. But afterward, They may think about the one person on the side track. They may imagine that person's family. They may imagine the life that could have continued. Even though they made a choice that reduced total harm, they carry the knowledge that they caused harm. The conscience is not clean. It is marked not by regret for choosing wrongly, but by the simple truth that harm was part of the choice. Now imagine someone who refuses to pull the lever. They let the trolley continue. 5 die. They may believe they preserved their moral principle. They did not directly cause harm. They may say, "I did not kill anyone. I simply did not interfere." But the moment does not disappear. Later in reflection, they may feel the weight of allowing preventable harm. They may picture the 5 people whose lives ended. They may ask themselves why they valued the avoidance of direct action above preventing greater loss. The stain appears not because they acted wrongly, but because the outcome contained harm that could have been prevented. In both cases, harm exists. In both cases, the conscience cannot be fully clean. The desire to feel untouched by the situation is understandable, but the situation does not allow that kind of distance. The person at the lever becomes part of what happens simply by being there. This pattern appears in real life often. A doctor may choose to stop aggressive treatment for a patient whose suffering has become overwhelming. The doctor may know the decision is right in terms of care and dignity, yet the doctor carries the memory of the moment when life was allowed to end. The stain is not a confession of wrongdoing. It is the mark of caring deeply. A manager must decide which employees to keep when a company faces financial strain. They may choose in a way that preserves the most stability. They may treat everyone with transparency and fairness. Yet they still know their decision changed someone's life in a painful way. The emotional cost does not disappear simply because the decision was justified. A parent sets a boundary their child does not understand. It is a boundary meant to protect growth, or safety, or long-term well-being. But the child cries or feels hurt in the moment. The parent made the right choice, yet they still feel the ache. Doing good did not remove the discomfort. The stain appears because we feel the weight of harm. Even when harm is part of doing good, if we did not feel it, something important would be missing. The stain is evidence that the lives affected mattered. Some people try to avoid the stain by looking for perfect solutions. They want the version of the trolley problem where no one dies. They want the moment where the decision does not require loss. But much of life does not offer perfect outcomes. Many meaningful choices involve giving something up, accepting limitation, or acting in the presence of risk. Others try to avoid the stain by distancing themselves from responsibility. They tell themselves they are not involved. They say someone else should decide. They say the situation is unfair. All of these statements may be true, but stepping aside does not erase involvement. It simply shifts the shape of the stain from action to omission. Moral decisions leave marks because moral decisions touch lives. The goal is not to feel nothing. The goal is to accept that doing good sometimes comes with sorrow. The person at the lever may never feel proud of their decision. They may not want to. Pride does not always belong in the space where life and harm intersect. What they can feel is honesty. They can say, "I made the best choice available, and I am living with its cost." That sentence does not clean the conscience. It makes room for the stain to be understood rather than avoided. The stain does not indicate failure. It indicates humanity. In the trolley problem, the tracks divide in a clear physical way. One path leads to 5 lives, the other leads to 1. The person at the lever stands at the point where the path splits, but the structure of the problem also mirrors something internal. Decisions happen like this in the mind. A moment arrives and the mind branches. One branch leads one direction, another leads somewhere else. The action taken sends the world down one line. The action not taken becomes a shadow line, a path that exists only in thought. The tracks are external, but the branching happens inside. When we make a choice, we usually see the moment as something small. We think of the decision as a step rather than a divergence. But every decision sets something in motion. It affects how events unfold, how someone experiences the world, or how we understand ourselves. The lines of life fork the way thoughts do. They split, sometimes subtly, and each branch leads to different outcomes. We do not always see those outcomes right away. In the trolley scenario, pulling the lever leads to one set of futures and not pulling it leads to another. In one version, 5 people live. They return home. Their families never learn that there was a moment when everything almost changed. They continue with ordinary days. The one person on the sidetrack does not return home in that version. Their family receives a different phone call. The world shifts in ways that ripple beyond the tracks. Small ripples accumulate into long timelines. If the lever is not pulled, the 5 do not return. Their families receive the calls. Their futures end. The one on the sidetrack continues. They live out experiences that stretch outward. One small action or inaction can shape another person's lifetime. The branches extend further than the moment. Most real decisions do not present their consequences so clearly. A person chooses to send a message rather than stay silent. A conversation happens that would not have happened otherwise. That conversation shifts a relationship. The relationship shifts a future. Or a person decides not to say anything. The silence becomes its own track. Something that could have grown does not. Think of a teacher who encourages one student at the right moment. The encouragement takes a few seconds, yet the student may carry it for years. It may lead them to see themselves differently. That different self leads to different actions, different ambitions, different circles, and different outcomes. The teacher may never learn what came from that moment. The track forked silently. Or consider someone who decides to step into a conflict to protect someone else. They do not know whether the attempt will work. They act because something in them says not acting would leave a mark. The conflict changes shape. Someone feels defended instead of abandoned. This slight emotional shift can influence how they trust others later. Lives branch on moments that feel small. The trolley problem forces us to see the branching clearly because the stakes are life and death. But the same structure applies to choices that seem ordinary. We rarely see the full branch because we live only the path we choose. The path we do not choose exists only as imagination, regret, relief, or curiosity. Sometimes, after making a decision, a person looks back and wonders where the other path would have led. This is not a sign of uncertainty. It is a sign of understanding the branching nature of life. The mind holds the alternative paths as part of memory. They are not real in the sense of being lived, but they are real in the sense of shaping how we see ourselves. In some cases, the branch becomes visible later. A person chooses one job over another, and much later meets a friend, partner, or collaborator through the work. They may think, if I had chosen differently, I would not have met them. Another person may leave a city for reasons that seemed minor at the time, and find that everything in their life takes a new direction. The moment of choice may have felt simple. The branch becomes visible only when looking back. The emotional weight of decisions often comes from this understanding. We know that our choices shape not only outcomes, but identities. In the trolley problem, The person at the lever does not only choose which lives continue, they choose the version of themselves they will live with. The person who pulls the lever lives with the knowledge that they caused harm while preventing greater harm. The person who does not pull it lives with the knowledge that they allowed more harm to unfold while avoiding direct action. Each path leads to a different story about who they are. Identity is built from these stories. A person may see themselves as someone who acts even when it is difficult, or they may see themselves as someone who refuses to cross certain moral lines. The decision in the moment shapes the self that continues afterward. The branching happens internally as well as externally. In daily situations, the same internal branching occurs. A person must decide whether to apologize first or hold pride. One path can repair a relationship. The other can distance two people for years. The apology may take seconds. The branch may last decades. Or someone must decide whether to share a truth that is painful. Speaking it could cause conflict and clarity. Not speaking it could preserve peace and create distance. Neither choice is simple. Both paths have consequences. The person must decide not only what happens next, but which version of themselves they want to carry. The mind is always building maps of these branching paths, even when we do not notice. We imagine how things might unfold. We imagine how others will respond. Then we choose. The choice becomes real. The branch becomes lived, and the unreal branch becomes memory. The tracks continue forward. In the trolley problem, the tracks are physical. In life, they are made of relationships, responsibilities, and inner narratives. Each fork is a moment of becoming. The person we are now is the result of many such forks, and the person we will be next waits at the next lever, where another branch will open. In the trolley problem, the 5 on the track and the 1 on the other are usually described in the same way. They have no names, no faces, no stories. They are presented as equal lives, and in that sense, they are equal. But when we imagine the scenario more vividly, something changes. If we allow the 1 to become someone familiar, and the 5 to remain strangers, the problem shifts. The emotional weight moves. The lever feels heavier. Compassion does not distribute itself evenly. It follows recognition, memory, likeness, and shared identity. We tend to care more for the familiar than the unfamiliar, even when we believe every life has the same worth. Humans are built to respond to what feels close. Our history as social beings shaped this. For most of human existence, our survival depended on recognizing and protecting our own small group. Strangers were unknown, and sometimes dangerous. Familiar people were part of our safety. The same patterns of feeling continue, even in societies where strangers and familiars are no longer so sharply divided. The mind still responds with greater warmth when it recognizes something of itself in another person. That recognition creates a bridge. Without it, empathy has farther to travel. In the scenario, if the one person on the sidetrack is your friend, sibling, parent, or someone whose presence matters to you, the numbers start to feel less clear. You know the 5 have lives as full and real as the 1. You do not doubt their human value, but your heart reaches for the person you know. You know their voice, their habits, the details of their life. You know what would be lost if they were gone. The others on the track remain distant, even if you try to imagine them. They do not become unreal, but they remain less vivid. This is not a flaw. It is part of how empathy works. Empathy depends on imagining the inner world of another person. That imagination is easier when we have memories to draw from. The familiar person has shape and meaning in our mind. The stranger is more like a silhouette. Both matter, but one feels closer. The difference appears in everyday life as well. People often feel more compassion when a single person tells their story than when they hear statistics about many people suffering. A news report may say that thousands are displaced by a disaster, and people acknowledge the tragedy but do not feel its emotional force. But when the story focuses on one family or one child, people feel moved. The mind grasps the specific more easily than the abstract. This is known as the identifiable victim effect. A single known story evokes more empathy than a larger, more distant tragedy. The story touches us because we can imagine the person involved. We can picture their day, their hopes, their pain. The stranger in the statistic remains harder to imagine. The compassion is still there, but it does not ignite as quickly. Sameness plays a role as well. We are drawn to people who share our language, cultural habits, background, personality, or experience. When someone reminds us of ourselves or someone we love, the mind labels them familiar. It does not take much. A shared way of speaking, a gesture, a look of worry that mirrors one we recognize in ourselves. These details create connection. Compassion flows more easily across this connection. Consider a workplace example. A supervisor must decide who to assign to an important project. One candidate is someone who reminds the supervisor of themselves early in their career. The supervisor sees their younger self reflected in them. Without intending it, they may feel protective or supportive toward that person. The other candidate may be equally capable, but feels more distant. The supervisor may believe they are being objective, yet their sense of familiarity influences the choice. Or consider a situation on a street. A person sees someone who appears lost or upset. If the person looks like someone from their own community or speaks a familiar language, they may feel more comfortable reaching out. If the person feels unfamiliar, they may hesitate. The difference is not about moral worth. It is about the ease of connection. We often say that all lives are equal in value. Most people believe this in principle, but our emotional responses are shaped by closeness, resemblance, and shared experience. This does not mean compassion is weak. It means compassion tends to follow known paths. To extend compassion beyond those paths requires intentional effort. Some people learn to widen their circle of familiarity. They develop a habit of imagining the stranger as someone with a full inner life, even when they know nothing about them. They remind themselves that every person they pass is living a story as real as their own. This is not instinctive, it is a choice. It takes practice to see the stranger as vivid, as real, as deserving of care as the familiar person. The trolley problem becomes harder when we allow ourselves to imagine the people involved fully. If we picture the five as individuals with families, histories, and futures, they become familiar in the imagination. The one on the sidetrack may remain familiar in memory. The tension becomes not between numbers, but between specific lives. The question is no longer which lives matter more. The question becomes how we navigate the limits of empathy. We do not choose who feels familiar, but we can choose to notice when familiarity influences our compassion. The awareness does not make the choice easier. It simply makes it more honest. The stranger becomes more real when we recognize that the difference between the stranger and the familiar is not value. It is only visibility. In the trolley problem, the logic seems clear. If one life can be sacrificed to save five, the math points in one direction. More lives continue. Less harm occurs. This is the core of utilitarian reasoning. Choose the action that produces the greatest good for the greatest number. It sounds straightforward, but when someone imagines themselves actually pulling the lever, the clarity of the logic does not feel calm or comforting. It can feel cold. It can feel lonely. The moment when the hand moves is not filled with triumph, but with a sense of heaviness. The one who chooses based on logic alone often carries the emotional burden of that choice in silence. Utilitarian clarity tells us that numbers matter, that outcomes matter more than intentions, that it is better to say 5 than 1. Many people agree with this when discussing the problem in an abstract way. They speak confidently about maximizing good and minimizing suffering. But when they picture the one person who will be harmed, the emotional tone changes. They may see that person's face. They may imagine the sound of their voice or the way they might look in their final moments. The numbers do not erase the person. This creates a form of loneliness. Someone who chooses based on logic knows the reasoning is sound. They may even believe deeply in the principle behind it, but they also know that others may not understand the emotional cost that comes with making the difficult choice. They know that people who did not have to decide may judge the decision. They may ask why one was sacrificed. They may ask how the decider could live with themselves. The one who follows the logic must carry not only the result, but the narrative others create about them. Imagine the scenario clearly. The lever moves. The trolley shifts to the side track. One person dies. 5 live. The world beyond the tracks continues. The 5 may never know what almost happened to them. Their families may never know that someone made a choice that saved them. There may be no gratitude, no recognition, no acknowledgement. But the person who pulled the lever knows. They know what they prevented. They know what they caused. The logic may be intact, but the emotional experience is not shared. That isolation forms a quiet room inside the person. In real life, this pattern appears in many forms. A surgeon may decide to amputate a limb to save a life. The logic is clear. The patient survives. The loss prevents greater harm. Yet the surgeon may feel the weight of taking something away, even when the decision was necessary. They know the reasoning. They also know what has been changed forever. A leader in a community may allocate resources in a way that benefits the majority. They may divert funding from one program to support another that serves more people. They may explain the reasoning. They may believe it is the best decision. But they may carry the knowledge that some were harmed or disappointed because of what they did. They may accept the consequences privately. A parent may make a decision to move their family to a different city in search of stability. They may know the move will provide better opportunities, but they see their child grieving the loss of familiar places and friends. The logic is clear. The emotional cost is real. The clarity does not prevent the ache. Utilitarian reasoning is often framed as unemotional or detached, but this is a misunderstanding. The person who chooses based on the greater good may feel deeply. They may feel more, not less, because they allow themselves to face the full scale of the situation. They recognize that one life cannot be dismissed simply because another life benefits. They see the value in every life involved. They choose anyway. That act requires emotional strength, not absence of feeling. The loneliness comes from the fact that the decision cannot be shared. Another person may agree with the logic, but they did not stand at the lever in that moment. They did not feel the internal conflict. They may discuss the decision calmly, as if it were a tidy equation. But the decider knows the equation sits on top of something more difficult. The knowledge that harm was prevented and harm was caused at the same time. People sometimes criticize utilitarian choices because they appear cold. They say the reasoning reduces lives to numbers. But the person who stands in that position does not experience lives as numbers. They experience the weight of the decision as something deeply human. They understand that responsibility involves choosing when all choices carry harm. They understand that caring does not always look gentle. The loneliness also appears because utilitarian reasoning does not offer emotional relief. It does not say, "You did the right thing, now you can feel at peace." It simply says, "This was the least harmful option." The emotional residue remains. There is no comforting narrative where everyone is saved. There is only the knowledge that something worse was prevented. Sometimes the person who chooses based on logic will not speak about the decision. They may fear that describing the reasoning will sound indifferent. They may worry that explaining themselves will make the loss feel smaller to others. They may remain silent, not because they feel nothing, but because they feel too much to turn it into words. In the trolley problem, logic tells us which track saves more lives. But the emotional truth is that the person who sees clearly what must be done also sees clearly what will be lost. The clarity is not cruel. The loneliness comes from the distance between what the mind knows and what the heart must carry. In the trolley problem, the lever looks like a simple object. It seems like the decision happens in the mind, as a matter of reasoning. But when someone imagines actually pulling the lever, the focus shifts to the body. The hand must move, muscles tighten, the heart speeds up, the breath changes. Morality in this moment is not only a thought, it is something physical. We do not think our way through the decision and then act as if the action is effortless. The body participates. The body remembers. The body carries the weight of what the mind decides. People often talk about ethics as if it lives only in the head. They speak about principles, values, reasoning, and logic as if emotion and sensation are separate. But moral decisions always involve the body, because we experience the world through the body. A decision is not complete until it becomes movement. Action does not happen in thought. It happens in muscle and nerve. Imagine standing at the lever. You know what is happening on the tracks. You know the consequences. Your hand hovers. The body reacts before the mind finishes speaking. The stomach tightens. The throat constricts. The shoulders tense. You may feel drawn to act or pulled back from action. The decision becomes something you feel physically. If you pull the lever, the body completes the decision. If you step away, the body completes that decision too. The gap between theory and action shows itself here. In conversation, many people say they would pull the lever to save 5 lives. But if they imagine feeling the lever move beneath their hand, they sense something more. They sense the moment when the body becomes responsible for the outcome. The mind provides reasons. The body bears the consequences. We see this same pattern in real life during moments of intervention. Imagine someone hears a cry for help in a crowded place. They know someone should respond. They know helping is the right thing. But the body hesitates. The feet stay planted. The heart beats fast. The mind says, "Move," and the body says, "Wait." The tension is physical. Doing the right thing requires the body to enter the situation. Doing nothing also happens in the body. The stillness itself becomes an action. Or consider a nurse who must hold a patient still to administer a painful but necessary treatment. The nurse knows the treatment will help, yet the body feels the patient's struggle. The arms hold firm, the breath remains steady, the heart feels the resistance. The nurse is not only making a medical judgment, they are using their physical presence in a way that causes pain in order to reduce greater pain. the body becomes the site of morality. The same is true for a parent who must physically prevent a child from doing something dangerous. They may lift the child away. The child may cry. The parent's muscles tighten as they hold the boundary. The parent knows the action is necessary, but the experience is felt through the arms, chest, and heart. Even when the moral choice is less dramatic, the body participates. A person apologizes. The voice changes tone. The breath slows. The chest softens. Another person forgives. Their shoulders lower. Their face releases tension. The body communicates moral meaning. In the trolley problem, we are encouraged to see the lever as neutral, but the lever is a point of contact. The body meets the world there. The moral decision passes through the hand. This is why the moment is heavy. The body understands what the decision means even before the mind finishes explaining it. The body also remembers. People who make difficult moral choices often recall how their body felt in the moment years later. They may not remember every argument they considered, but they remember the sound of their breath or the weight in their chest. Memory is not only cognitive, it is physical. The body stores experience in ways the mind cannot always describe. This is part of why moral residue remains after decisions that involve harm. It is not just that the mind replays the scenario, the body replays it. The body recalls the tension, the motion, or the stillness. The morality of the moment is embodied. The structure of the trolley problem hides this. It presents morality as pure reasoning. It abstracts the situation to make it easier to analyze, but in doing so, it removes one of the most important aspects of real moral experience: the physical sense of being the one who acts. When someone says they could never pull the lever, they may not mean they reject the logic. They may mean they cannot imagine their hand delivering the action. Their body refuses. The refusal is not irrational. It reveals how morality is lived, not just thought. When someone says they would pull the lever even though it hurts, they are describing a willingness to endure the bodily experience of causing harm to reduce greater harm. This is not cold. It is difficult. It is not detached. It is embodied commitment. Morality is not something we think first and feel later. We think and feel at the same time, and the body carries the cost of what the mind has chosen. The lever is only an object, but the hand that moves it is alive. The heart that guides the hand is alive. The body tells the truth of the decision, even when the words remain calm. The trolley problem highlights the moment of choice, but beneath that moment is the body that makes the choice real. Morality is not only in the reasoning. It is in the breath, the pulse, the tension, and the release. The body pulls the lever. The body remembers that it did. In the trolley problem, the moment of choice happens quickly. The lever is pulled or it is not. The trolley continues on one track or the other. The lives affected change in an instant. But after the impact, once the motion stops and the noise fades, there is a quiet that does not end as fast. This quiet is the space where the person who made the choice must live. No one else may have seen what happened. No one may ever know there was a decision to make at all. The world outside may continue unchanged, but inside the person who stood at the lever, something settles that is not loud and not gone. This silence has weight. People often imagine moral decisions as public events. They think of choices that others witness, discuss, praise, or criticize. But some of the hardest decisions we make happen when no one is watching. A choice made in private can shape identity as much as, or more than, a choice made in front of others. When no one witnesses the decision, there is no one to confirm that the choice was justified. There is no one to reassure or correct or comfort. The silence becomes the companion to the memory. Imagine someone who pulls the lever to save 5 lives. The one on the sidetrack dies. Perhaps no one ever understands what happened. The 5 may never know they were saved. The one's family may never know why it happened. The newspapers may call it an accident. The person at the lever lives with the knowledge of what they prevented and what they caused. The logic of the choice remains sound, but the affirmation that others sometimes provide is absent. The person must live with the decision alone. This is not only true in hypothetical problems, it appears in real life in quieter forms. A doctor may make a decision in the middle of the night during emergency care. No one else in the room may grasp the difficulty of the choice. The doctor does what is necessary, but the memory lingers later in the silence of driving home or washing hands in an empty hallway. The act is done. The explanation remains internal. A parent may decide not to speak a harsh truth to their child because they see the child is already carrying more than they can handle. The parent chooses compassion in the form of restraint. No one sees the effort it took to hold back. The silence afterward holds the cost of protecting another from pain. A friend may choose to step away from a relationship that has become harmful, even though the separation hurts. They do this quietly. They do not explain to others because the reasons are complex and difficult to put into words. They live with the aftermath alone, not because they regret their choice, but because explaining it would not make it easier. The silence after impact is not emptiness. It is reflection. It is memory. It is the mind replaying the moment in different light. It is the body remembering how the breath felt, how the muscles tightened, how the heart moved. The silence contains everything the world does not see. When no one witnesses a choice, there is also no external narrative to lean on. People often find meaning in others' reactions. They take comfort in shared understanding. They use language to place events into order. In silence, the person must create their own narrative. They must decide how to speak to themselves about what they did. The story formed in private becomes part of identity. Some people tell themselves, "I did what I had to do." That sentence can be true and still leave a shadow. Others tell themselves, "I prevented something worse." This sentence may also be true, and still the loss remains. The silence does not erase the logic, and the logic does not erase the silence. There is also the possibility of doubt. When no one else witnessed the moment, there is no confirmation that the memory is understood correctly. The mind may return to the moment again and again. It may replay small details. It may ask whether there was another option that was not seen in the moment. This questioning does not always indicate regret. It can simply be the mind trying to make sense of a turning point that cannot be revisited. In the trolley problem, the simplicity of the tracks hides the complexity of the aftermath. It suggests that once the choice is made, the problem ends. But real moral decisions do not end when the action ends. They continue in thought, in feeling, in memory. The silence after impact is part of the decision. It is where the decision is processed, understood, and carried. Sometimes, the silence becomes gentler over time. The memory does not disappear, but the person learns to live with it. They learn to hold the complexity without forcing it to become simple. They learn that responsibility does not always come with recognition or comfort. Other times, the silence remains heavy. The person carries the moment like a stone in the pocket. It does not interfere with daily life, but it is always present. They may touch it without meaning to. They may feel its outline even when they cannot see it. The trolley problem is often presented as a puzzle of choice. But the deeper part of the problem lies in what comes after the choice, in the quiet moments where memory has no witness. The person at the lever must live with the silence, not because they chose wrongly, but because choosing at all leaves an imprint that does not fade just because the world moves on. In the trolley problem, The person at the lever stands outside the situation in a way that seems clear. The 5 people on one track are in danger. The one on the other track is in danger. The person deciding appears separate, like an observer who must choose which group will face harm. But when we look closer, the separation is not as clean as it seems. The person at the lever is not outside the equation. Their choice shapes not only the outcome for others, but also the story they tell about themselves. The track splits outward, but it also bends inward. Each path leads back to the one who chooses. When someone imagines pulling the lever, they imagine more than the motion. They imagine the meaning of the action. They imagine the kind of person they would be if they acted, and the kind of person they would be if they did not. The choice becomes a mirror. The 5 and the 1 matter, but something else happens alongside that reality. The person must confront themselves. Imagine the lever as a point where identity forms. If you pull it, you may see yourself as someone who accepts responsibility and makes difficult decisions. You may also see yourself as someone who caused harm. If you refuse to pull it, you may see yourself as someone who avoids direct harm. You may also see yourself as someone who allowed greater harm by not acting. Each path leads to a different version of you. The problem is not only about what happens on the tracks. It is about who you become in the moment after the decision. This happens in ordinary choices as well. A person chooses to tell the truth when it is uncomfortable. In doing so, they see themselves as someone who values honesty. But they also see the effect their honesty has on someone else. The truth may cause pain or change a relationship. The track leads outward and inward at the same time. Or consider silence. A person may stay quiet to avoid conflict. They may justify the silence as caution or care. But the silence can also become part of how they see themselves. If silence becomes a habit, they may later feel distant from their own voice. They may ask themselves when they stopped speaking for what mattered. The choice that once felt small becomes part of identity. The trolley problem is exaggerated so we can see these patterns clearly. But real life works the same way. Every choice has 2 outcomes, one in the world and one inside the person. The external outcome affects others. The internal outcome affects how the person understands their own character. This helps explain why moral decisions feel heavy, even when the logic is clear. If morality were only about outcomes, the decision would be simple. But morality involves the self. When we choose, we are not only shaping what happens, we are shaping who we are. And once the self changes, it does not go back easily. People often say things like, "I had no choice." They say this when the circumstances were overwhelming, or when one option felt impossible to accept. But the phrase also means something else. It means, I could not become the person who would have made the other choice. The decision reveals something about identity that was already present before the moment. If someone says they could not pull the lever because they cannot cause harm directly, they are describing the self they know. If someone says they would pull it because the lives of the many outweigh the one, they are describing the values they hold as part of who they are. Both statements reveal the track inside the mind. There is another element to consider. When you imagine the 5 or the 1, it is possible to imagine yourself in their place. When you imagine yourself on the main track, you understand fear. When you imagine yourself on the side track, you understand vulnerability. When you imagine yourself at the lever, you understand responsibility. The boundaries between roles are not fixed. The mind moves between them. The equation becomes a circle. This movement is what gives compassion its shape. We care about others because we know what it is like to be someone who could be harmed or someone who could act. or someone who could be unable to act. We see our own humanity reflected in others. The trolley scenario asks us to step into all positions at once, even though we can only stand physically in one. This is not easy to hold. The mind prefers clarity. It prefers to say, this is right or this is wrong. But the self involved in moral decisions does not divide cleanly. It is shaped by memory, upbringing, temperament, and lived experience. Some people act quickly. Some hesitate. Some focus on outcomes. Some focus on intentions. These tendencies do not appear at random, grow from the life behind the moment. In quieter forms, the same pattern repeats. Someone chooses whether to forgive. Someone chooses whether to confront. Someone chooses whether to help. The decision affects others, but it also affects how the person understands themselves afterward. It lays another piece in the structure of their identity. The trolley tracks run outward into the world, where lives continue or change, but they also run inward, where we come to understand ourselves as people who act or refrain or struggle to decide. The track always leads back to the person at the lever. The decision once made becomes part of them. In the trolley problem, the choice looks like a test of kindness. Pull the lever or do not. Save more lives or save fewer. But when you look closely, neither option feels purely kind. One choice harms one person, the other harms 5. There is no action that leaves everyone safe. The scenario forces us to see something that is true far beyond the tracks. There is no perfect world where every good outcome can exist at once. Many real decisions ask us to accept that harm and care can be present in the same moment. The thought of pure kindness, the kind that leaves no wounds, does not match the world we live in. We often grow up with the idea that moral choices can be clean, that the right thing feels right, that kindness always looks soft, gentle, and peaceful. But genuine kindness often requires choosing between versions of suffering. Sometimes kindness is firm. Sometimes it is painful. Sometimes it means acting in a way that feels harsh in the moment to prevent something worse later. The trolley problem makes this impossible to ignore. No matter what you do, someone is harmed. The only question is how you carry the harm. Many daily situations reflect this. Think of a friend who is struggling but refuses to see the problem. You can stay silent to avoid hurting them. This feels gentle, but the silence may allow the struggle to continue unchecked. Or you can speak, naming what scares you. The truth may hurt them. It may cause conflict. The moment may not look kind. But silence can become neglect, and speaking can become care. Neither choice is harmless. One simply distributes harm differently. Some choices at work carry the same shape. A manager may remove someone from a project because their work is affecting the team. The removal may feel cruel to the person. The manager may worry about causing embarrassment or pain, but keeping them on the project may harm the rest of the group. It may lead to frustration, resentment, or burnout. The manager must choose how harm unfolds. Neither choice is perfectly kind. One prevents greater harm, but still causes pain. In families, the impossibility of pure kindness appears in another form. A parent may have to say no to something a child wants, not because they want to be strict, but because they see consequences the child cannot yet see. The child may feel misunderstood or blocked. The parent may feel the weight of the child's disappointment. The choice does not feel clean. Love does not always look like giving what is wanted. It sometimes looks like protecting against outcomes that are not yet visible. Even in medical care, decisions often involve harm intended to prevent greater harm. A surgeon makes an incision to remove disease. The act injures the body in order to heal it. A therapist may ask a patient to revisit painful memories in order to release the hold those memories have. A social worker may intervene in a family situation in a way that causes distress in order to ensure safety. None of these actions feel purely kind when they are happening. They feel complicated, heavy, sometimes even harsh. But the intention behind them is care. The idea of pure kindness suggests a world where good actions cause only good outcomes. But real kindness often exists in tension with real limitations. We do not choose conditions. We respond to them. The trolley problem removes the illusion that there is always a path that avoids harm. It shows that sometimes we must choose the harm we can live with, the harm that reduces greater harm, or the harm that aligns with the values we hold. Some people respond to this by trying to avoid choosing. They step back. They tell themselves the world will settle on its own. But not choosing is also a choice. Inaction shapes outcomes just as action does. The trolley continues on the main track if we let go of the lever. People sometimes say, "I didn't decide anything," but the outcome still happens. The idea that harm can be avoided by refusing to act is comforting, but not real. When someone understands that pure kindness is not always possible, something shifts. They stop trying to make every choice feel good. They start focusing instead on doing the least harm possible, or doing the most good possible given the situation. They accept that discomfort is part of compassion. They understand that caring for others does not always feel gentle from the inside. This does not mean we should act without thought. It means the desire to avoid all harm cannot guide us, because that desire will freeze us in place. It will silence us when we need to speak. It will stop us from intervening when harm is unfolding. It will make us choose the appearance of kindness over the reality of it. If someone pulls the lever in the trolley scenario, they may feel the pain of causing a death. They may feel that the outcome is still tragic, but they also know they prevented something worse. The kindness in their action exists alongside grief. If someone does not pull the lever, they may feel they avoided causing direct harm. They may see themselves as gentle. But the 5 deaths still occur, and the cost of gentleness becomes larger than it seems. Everyday moral life mirrors this. We carry the weight of imperfect choices. We try to choose the option that allows for the most care, even when the care involves pain. We learn to live inside the complexity rather than trying to escape it. There is no perfect world in which kindness is untouched by difficulty. There are only choices that make the world better or worse in small increments. We live not in a world of clean answers, but in a world of careful attempts. We cannot make outcomes pure. We can only make them better.
In the trolley problem, the moment appears singular. There's a track, a lever, and a choice that happens once. But real life does not present morality in one clear moment. There's no single lever. The trolley does not stop. Every day, we are faced with choices that affect others in ways we may not see. Some choices are large and memorable. Others are small and pass quietly. Together, they form a pattern of who we are. The idea of one dramatic moral decision is comforting because it suggests clarity. In reality, the decisions spread across a lifetime, often arriving without announcement. The track keeps moving. Consider how we choose where to place our attention. Attention is a form of care. If we listen to someone who is struggling, we provide relief. If we are distracted, rushed, or closed off, the person may carry their burden alone. This is not a single event. It repeats. Every conversation is a small moral decision. Every moment of presence or absence influences a relationship. The trolley moves in quiet ways. Or think about how we decide whether to step in when we see something wrong. Someone makes a harsh comment to another person. A coworker is treated unfairly. A stranger needs help, but people avoid eye contact. The choice to act or not act appears again and again. Sometimes we intervene, sometimes we stay silent. The pattern matters more than the single instance. The self is formed in repetition. The trolley problem is sharp and dramatic, because it removes uncertainty. The stakes are visible, the harm is immediate. But many of our moral decisions take place when consequences are unclear. We often act without knowing what will happen. We cannot count lives saved or harmed. We must rely on values rather than outcomes. This does not mean the decisions are smaller. It means the weight comes from the ongoing nature of these choices. There is no final moment where morality is settled. We must choose again tomorrow. Think of a teacher who works with students for many years. They face choices every day about how much patience to give, how much structure to enforce, how much encouragement to offer. There is no single defining moment. The difference appears slowly. One student remembers a kind tone on a difficult day. Another remembers being dismissed. The teacher may not remember the moment at all, yet the student carries it. Moral impact does not always announce itself. Or consider someone who cares for an aging relative. The work may involve physical effort, emotional strain, and the limits of their own time. There is no single heroic action. Instead, there are hundreds of small decisions, whether to stay patient when tired, whether to show up when it would be easier to step away, whether to treat the person with dignity when frustration is rising. These choices form a quiet record of care. The effort is not seen widely. The trolley keeps moving. Even decisions about resources and priorities reflect this. A family decides how to spend limited money. Choosing to pay for one need may mean another goes unmet. The decision is not about right versus wrong. It is about how to distribute care in a world where resources are finite. This happens month after month. It does not feel dramatic, but it shapes the lives of those involved. People sometimes speak about the moment that defines a person, but most people are defined not by one moment, but by repeated patterns of action. The trolley problem is useful because it reveals how we think about harm and responsibility. But the real test is how we act across time, when no single decision feels large enough to declare itself as moral. The self forms through dozens of small pivots, not one sharp turn. There are moments when the trolley moves faster. A crisis arrives. Someone must decide quickly. Someone must step in. These moments feel dramatic, but they are influenced by everything that came before. The habits of care built in smaller decisions shape how we respond in larger ones. A person who has practiced attention, empathy, and responsibility may find themselves able to act when urgency demands it. A person who has practiced avoidance may freeze. The large decision is built on the many small ones that came before it. The ongoing nature of moral choice can feel tiring. There is no moment of completion where we become finally good. There is only the next situation, the next choice, the next chance to repair or overlook, to comfort or withdraw, to acknowledge or ignore. But there is also something steadying in this. We do not have to be perfect in one decisive act. We can shape who we are through repetition. We can adjust, repair, and learn over time. The trolley problem suggests a single moment where we must reveal our ethics. But real life gives us many moments and many opportunities to act differently than we did before. This does not make morality easier, but it makes it more human. The track runs through every day. The trolley keeps moving. The lever is always near.
In the trolley problem, the moment of choice is often imagined as clear. The person at the lever sees the situation, understands the consequences, and decides. But when we pay attention to how such decisions actually feel, the picture changes. The mind may reach one conclusion, while the body and heart
reach another. A person might know what seems right in theory, yet feel pulled in a different direction when the choice becomes real. The hands may shake even when the reasoning is steady. The heart may feel certain even when logic points elsewhere. Guilt and intuition move together, sometimes supporting each other, sometimes pulling apart. Guilt appears when we understand that our actions affect others. Intuition appears as a quiet sense of what feels right. Both are deeply human. Both shape moral decisions, but they do not always agree. In the trolley scenario, pulling the lever to save 5 lives might be the logical choice. It minimizes harm. It preserves more futures. The mind can say, "This is the greater good." Yet the moment someone imagines themselves physically pulling the lever, they may feel guilt rise before the action even happens. The guilt does not wait for consequences. It arrives in anticipation. The thought of causing harm, even for a reason, touches something in us that logic alone cannot quiet. This conflict shows itself outside theoretical problems too. Imagine a situation in which someone must tell a difficult truth. They know that honesty will prevent misunderstanding later. They know it is the responsible path. Yet the moment before they speak, something inside tightens. The voice hesitates. The body reacts. The guilt of causing pain sits beside the intuition that honesty is necessary. The hands may shake while the heart recognizes the importance of the moment. Or think of someone ending a relationship that they know is harmful. They have reasons. They understand that staying would cause deeper harm over time. Yet they may feel guilt because they know the other person will experience loss. The decision can feel both right and painful. The guilt does not prove the decision is wrong. It shows the depth of connection involved. Guilt is often misunderstood. Many people think guilt is a sign they acted incorrectly. But guilt simply means we recognize the reality of harm. If we were unable to feel guilt, our decisions would lose depth. Guilt shows that we do not take the effects of our actions lightly. It is not an enemy of morality. It is part of morality. Intuition is sometimes misunderstood as well. Intuition is not impulse. It is formed from experience, memory, and recognition that happens faster than conscious thought. A person may say, "I can't explain it, but this feels right." This does not mean they are acting without reason. It means the reasoning is internal and layered. Intuition can reveal values we did not know we held. But intuition and guilt can also conflict in confusing ways. A person may feel drawn to act to protect someone else, yet feel guilty for stepping into a situation where others might judge them for interfering. A person may feel intuitively that they must stay silent to preserve peace, yet feel guilty knowing silence allows harm to continue. The conflict is not a sign of weakness. It is evidence that the situation holds real moral weight. The trolley problem makes this conflict visible because it is simplified. But in real life, the stakes are often hidden. We do not always know who will be affected or how. We act based on partial information. We choose with incomplete clarity. The hands shake because the moment holds uncertainty. The heart knows because values do not disappear just because the situation is complex. There are times when intuition leads a person to act before they have time to think. Someone may step into danger to help a stranger. Someone may speak up when cruelty appears. The action comes quickly, without planning. Later, they may feel guilt for what they risked or what they caused. They may question whether the action was correct, but the moment was shaped by something deep and immediate.
a recognition of another's humanity. There are also times when someone follows logic because they believe it is necessary, even when intuition resists. A leader may choose to allocate resources in a way that benefits many but disappoints a few. The guilt that follows does not cancel the reasoning. It shows the decision mattered. The heart does not ignore the one who is harmed just because the many are helped. This tension is often most intense when neither choice is clean. In such cases, guilt is not a sign of failure. It is a sign that the person remains connected to others. And intuition is not a sign of irrationality. It is a sign that the person has lived enough to know what matters. The hands shake when decisions reshape lives. The heart knows when harm cannot be avoided, only directed with care. A firefighter who must choose which person to reach first carries this conflict. A teacher who must discipline a student while understanding the student is struggling carries it. A friend who must confront someone they care about carries it. The decisions are not abstract. They live in muscle, breath, and memory. After such decisions, the guilt may remain, but the intuition remains too. Over time, people learn to hold both. They learn that they can act with care, even when the action hurts. They learn that guilt does not have to shape identity. It can simply be honored as evidence of compassion. And they learn that intuition can guide them even when certainty is impossible. Hands may shake, but the heart still knows. In the trolley problem, we usually imagine ourselves at the lever. We picture making the decision. We imagine the responsibility falling on us. But in real life, we are often not the one at the lever. We are the passenger who watches. We see choices made by others. We see harm happening. We see injustice, or need, or confusion unfold in front of us. We are present, but not the actor. And the challenge becomes, what is our moral role when we are not the one making the decision, but we are there to witness it? Witnessing is not passive. To see something shapes us. The experience of watching someone else choose can stay with us as strongly as if we had acted ourselves. Sometimes the weight of the moment is heavier when we do not act, because we must live with the knowledge that we remained still. If someone else stands at the lever and chooses one track over another, the witness sees the aftermath. The witness sees the expressions, the relief, the grief, the silence. The witness also sees themselves in the situation. They may think, would I have chosen the same? Or could I have changed what happened? The witnessing becomes its own kind of moral experience. There are real situations that mirror this. A person sits in a meeting and watches as one colleague is spoken to in a way that is sharp, unfair, or dismissive. The person watching does not speak. They do not cause the harm, but they feel something shift inside. They know they witnessed an injury and did nothing to interrupt it. They may think about the moment later, replaying it. The scene becomes a private moral memory. The moral harm did not come from direct action. It came from proximity to an event where a response was possible. Or someone watches a friend make a choice that will cause them pain later. They see the pattern forming. They understand where it leads. They might stay silent because they do not want to interfere. They might speak but hold back part of the truth. The witness carries the awareness of what could happen. When the pain arrives, the witness carries the knowledge that they saw the track but did not adjust it. Witnessing also happens in public settings. A person walks past someone in need. A crowd watches an argument escalate. Onlookers may tell themselves they are just observers, that the responsibility belongs to the people directly involved, but witnessing does not remove moral involvement. The passenger in the trolley scenario is still part of the event, even if they never touch the lever. Some people avoid acknowledging their role as witnesses.
because they think morality only counts when we act. But the memory of not acting has emotional weight. We remember not only what we did, but what we ignored. Silence becomes part of our history. There are moments when witnessing can turn into action. Someone steps forward. Someone says, "Stop." Someone asks, "Are you okay?" The action may be small, but small actions can shift momentum. They can change how people understand the moment. They can prevent harm from continuing. But there are also times when action is not possible. The witness cannot alter the outcome. A doctor watches a patient decline despite every intervention. A family member watches a loved one make a decision that cannot be stopped. A friend watches grief unfold and cannot remove the cause. In these moments, the witness can only remain present. Presence becomes its own kind of moral contribution. To stay with someone through pain is a choice. The difficulty of being the witness is that there is no clear rule. There is no single instruction for when to act and when to stay still. The witness must interpret the situation in real time with limited information. They must judge whether stepping in will help or harm. This uncertainty is part of the weight of witnessing. The witness also carries perspective that the actor does not. The person at the lever is focused on the decision. The witness sees the broader field. They see the relationships, the histories, the emotional context. This perspective can create clarity or confusion. The witness may recognize harm sooner. They may also hesitate because they see too many angles. Over time, the role of witness shapes the self. Someone who watches often and remains silent may come to see themselves as someone who does not intervene, even when intervention is needed. Someone who watches and steps in may come to understand themselves as someone who shares responsibility for the well-being of others. The moral self is not built only through action, it is built through attention. What we choose to notice and what we choose to ignore form the boundaries of our ethical life. Witnessing is an act of noticing, and when we notice, we cannot say we did not know. The passenger on the trolley may feel powerless, but they are not empty in the scene. They learn something about themselves. They learn what they fear, what they value, and what they hope to avoid. They learn how close they are willing to stand to harm. They learn how silence can feel. Being the witness does not remove us from the moral landscape. It places us inside it, in a position where we must recognize that seeing is not neutral. The moment of watching is also a moment of becoming.
In the trolley problem, the decision is made quickly. The lever is pulled or it is not. The trolley moves, the outcome unfolds, and the moment is over. But the mind does not end the moment when the world does. The mind continues to return to the scene. It replays the choice. It considers alternatives. It imagines what might have happened if the hand had moved differently, or if the hand had stayed still. This is regret, not the loud regret that erupts all at once, but the slow burn that returns again and again over time. It does not demand attention, but it never disappears. Regret forms when we recognize that a different choice was possible. It does not require that we believe the different choice would have been better, only that we can picture it. The mind makes a second version of the world, one that exists only in thought. We compare the world we live in now to the world that could have been. The distance between the two worlds becomes the space where regret lives. This happens in situations far smaller than life and death. Someone speaks sharply to a friend during an argument. The words come out fast, without consideration. The moment passes, the friendship continues. But later, maybe in quiet hours, the person hears the tone again in memory. They imagine themselves pausing instead. They imagine responding with calm or understanding. There is no undoing the moment. The memory plays on its own schedule.
Or someone chooses not to show up when another person needed them. They had reasons. They were tired, overwhelmed, unsure, or afraid of saying the wrong thing. Life moves forward. The relationship continues, but the moment of absence remains as a small mark. The person may find their mind returning to it unexpectedly. Regret does not shout. It sits in the corner and waits. In the trolley problem, regret can form from either choice. If someone pulls the lever and one person dies while 5 are saved, the person may know the numbers are justified. They may know they prevented greater harm. But when they think of the one, regret surfaces. It does not mean the decision was wrong. It means the decision involved loss. Regret reflects care. If someone does not pull the lever and 5 die while 1 lives, regret may form in a different shape. They may feel guilt, not for acting, but for failing to act. They may think of the 5. They may imagine their futures, their families, their unfinished plans. The mind recreates what cannot be recovered. Regret appears because we are able to imagine alternatives. This is a strength, not a flaw. A person who cannot imagine different choices also cannot learn from their own history. But imagination has a cost. The more clearly we picture the alternate world, the more sharply regret can burn. The slow burn of regret is often private. People do not always speak about these memories because the event may seem too small to justify the weight it carries. One short conversation, one moment of hesitation, one careless sentence. But regret is not sized according to the moment. It is sized according to meaning. If the moment touched something important, a relationship, a belief, a responsibility, then the regret can last. There are situations where the regret becomes part of identity. Someone may say, "I'm the kind of person who didn't speak when I should have," or "I am the one who walked away." This narrative can shape how they see themselves long after the moment has passed. Sometimes this self-story is unfair. It captures a single moment and treats it as a full description of character. Yet the story can feel true because regret attaches to the memory so tightly. Others try to push regret away. They tell themselves not to think about it. They repeat explanations to justify the decision. "I didn't know. I did what seemed right. There was no better option." These statements may be true, but regret does not dissolve through logic. It dissolves when the person finds a way to integrate the memory into their understanding of themselves. There are also cases where regret helps. A slow-burning regret can teach a person something about who they want to be. Someone who regrets not speaking for a friend may find that next time, their voice rises when needed. Someone who regrets acting in anger may discover patience when the next conflict comes. The regret becomes a signal rather than a wound. But sometimes regret simply remains. It may soften with time, but it does not vanish. A decision involving harm, loss, or betrayal may stay in the mind for years. A person may replay the moment, not to change it, but because it matters. The replay is a form of respect for what was lost. The slow burn of regret often appears in the body. The breath tightens when the memory returns. The jaw clenches. The chest feels heavy. The body remembers even when the mind tries to move on. Regret is not only cognitive, it is physical. The trolley problem makes this visible because the decision is so clear, but the same pattern occurs in everyday life. Someone who once walked past a person in need may later pause when they see another in similar distress. The regret guides the body before the mind speaks. Or someone who once spoke harshly may find themselves speaking more gently
without having to think about it. The body K's the lesson. Regret is not the enemy of moral life. It is one of its consequences. The slow burn means we cared. It means we understood the moment mattered. It means the choice touched something that remains alive inside us. The decision may be long past, but the mind continues to walk the tracks, noticing again the point where they divided.